Welcome, 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 welcome to New Life. It's good to be here. It is a good time to be at New Life. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that you're excited to be here. And we got Fall Fest next week too. Come on. That's going to be awesome. We're super excited for that. So make sure you're bringing people with you. We're going to have a good time as we celebrate the fall season in I'm not going to say that in wild fashion. Okay, so we just started the series Yahweh. Last week we covered three things, and if you weren't there last week, Yahweh ultimately is the name of our God, right? We have a God, and His name is Yahweh. So He gave us His name. And then we covered three things about Him and His character and His personality. We went right to Genesis 1 and 2, and we looked at the fact that Yahweh exists, right? He is. He exists. He's incredible. That's big. That's mesmerizing. He's mesmerizing. That's inspiring. That's magnificent, right? But He just isn't. He doesn't just exist. He also is creator. So Yahweh is creator. And then we found out at the end of Genesis 1 and 2 that He reveals that He loves us right away, right in the beginning. So Yahweh is creator, and Yahweh loves us, and that's so exciting. But then that's kind of in the wonder world, right? That's like in kind of the fake world where everything goes perfect all the time, right? Like that's where some of y'all live in those houses that are absolutely perfect and no one ever makes a mistake, and it's like that's where He loves us, right? Like in this perfect world, He loves us. But what happens, and that's the next chapter in Genesis 3, is like, but what happens when we screw up? What happens when we make mistakes? What happens when we're faced with our own sin, our own depravity, our own issues, our own shortcomings of honestly just not being God? So we're human, we're making a bunch of mistakes, and how does Yahweh respond to us? And I love it. Over the course of the next couple chapters, Yahweh pursues us. Yahweh comes to us. So Adam and Eve mess up, and what's happening? Do you guys remember? Yahweh shows up. He goes, "Hey, what's going on?" And Adam's in a bush somewhere naked. He's like, "Yeah, I'm naked and afraid." It's like a bad reality TV show. In fact, I think it is one now. And that's kind of the moment. He's like, "I don't know what happened. We ate this fruit, and now I'm naked, and I'm in the jungle, and this is not a good situation for anybody to be in." And Yahweh's like, "What you do? Oh my goodness! Oh, you did this. It was the woman." The woman's like, "It was the snake." He's like, "Oh my God! Okay, oh my me." I always love it. And so He begins to talk to us. He begins to reason with us. He begins to work with us on it. He goes, "Okay, well, guess what? There's going to be some consequences for your actions." And He starts to tell the consequences for the actions. And then the next chapter we see, by the way, they're out of the garden now. The relationship with Yahweh is not broken. He's still in relationship with His creation. We know that because Cain and Abel immediately come and they're engaging in relationship with Yahweh. They're offering some offerings. Cain looks over at Abel, or Yahweh's like, "I like these ones. I don't like these ones." Cain's like, "Now I'm mad at him." Jealousy, discord, all this craziness. God's like, Yahweh is telling Cain, He's like, hey, chill out. That jealousy, discord thing, that's a serious thing. You better take note, or else something bad's about to happen. Cain does not take note. He goes, murders his brother, right? I'm fast forwarding through this story, right? Track with me. We're going somewhere with it. And as he murders his brother, right? So his brother's murder, what happens? Does Cain go to Yahweh? No. Cain, I can only picture, is in a similar boat of Adam. He's probably naked. Well, maybe he's got his clothes on now. Hopefully. He's afraid. He's avoiding, right? And then finally Yahweh comes to Cain and goes, "Hey, what's going on? Where's your brother?" "I'm not my brother's keeper." He's like, "It was a rhetorical question, dummy. I'm Yahweh. I know what happened. You killed him." And he's like, "I did." And so He goes, "There's going to be consequences for that. Now you're going to have a life. You're going to be on the run." And Cain even pleads. Listen, think about how bold, by the way, Cain is. I don't know if I'd be this bold. I just killed my brother, and then I'm like, "Hey, but wait, don't make me do that, because that's going to cause me, I'm going to die. Somebody else is going to kill me if that happens." And so Yahweh, in the midst of that brokenness, in the midst of that depravity, in the midst of the issue of literally you've killed your own brother, He goes, "I'll put a mark of protection on you so you're still safe." Somebody in here, we could just stop the whole service right now. Somebody in here needs to know right off the bat that right in the next chapter, you're dealing with the worst of the worst. Maybe you're like, you don't know what I've done. The most heinous crime that you could imagine. I've literally murdered my brother. And there's a God named Yahweh who's going, and I still want to find protection from my creation. And you are his creation. And so he's like, yo, I'm ready. Let's deal from the get-go. Another kind of new birth that many people talk about from creation, and then the Exodus story, right? Moses brings up the Israelites out of Egypt, and as they get out of Egypt, Yahweh says to Moses, hey, I'm going to reveal myself to all of the Israelites. We're going to talk. We're going to do this with all of them. And the Israelites, you know what happens? The Israelites are like, no! Why? Why? Because they were scared. It's the same thing. We're still living in a place of fear in regards to Yahweh. Why? Because every other God that they've ever met that has the might and the ability that Yahweh has used it to crush and demolish. So they haven't learned that yet. But they go, just send Moses. Don't do it with all of us. Just send Moses. So that's the interaction that creates. And from the fall, from the moment that we're out of the garden, all the way to the redemption story of Jesus, there is 1,033 pages. And you know what the whole point of that whole narrative is? That we have a God named Yahweh who pursues us in the midst of our chaos. We have a Yahweh who pursues us. I'm telling you. Regardless of what you've done. And if you go back through these Israelites, they did some heinous, crazy, twisted up things. Like if you start reading some of the things they did, your rap sheet is going to start to look like you're going to show up in heaven with like a gold star booklet. Like, hey, in comparison, y'all were crazy. But even in spite of their craziness, Yahweh pursues them. Even in spite of their darkness, Yahweh pursues them. Even in spite of their sin, in spite of their depravity, Yahweh goes, I'm willing to pursue you. And he gets finally, I think, up to this point where, right, we start to look at this, and Yahweh continues to pursue humankind, and then finally something happens. Yeshua shows up. Yeshua is just the Hebrew name for Jesus, but that's the real one, not the, never mind. And Yahweh sends Jesus, Yeshua, to earth. And why? Because we weren't getting a good picture. One of the primary reasons is literally just to reveal, just to go, this is who I am. Your political ideologies are not representing who I am. Your religious institutions are not representing who I am. You're going to need a clear, distinct picture of who I am. So I'm going to send myself in the flesh, and this is me. And that's something so important to understand when anytime you're reading scripture, is that Yahweh is Yeshua. Yahweh is Jesus. Jesus is Yahweh. In fact, they did this entire council of Nicaea. It was all about the triune being of God. They got together and they were like, well, we've been calling Yahweh Yahweh for a long time, but what do we do with this Jesus guy? And they're like, oh, he is him. He is him who? Him is he. He is him. Who's on first? They were doing that bit long before we figured it out. And that's what's happening. So Yahweh is Yeshua. So when we see Jesus do something, it is the direct, most best representation that we have on this side of earth as to who God really is, as to who Yahweh is. Yahweh is Yeshua. Yeshua is Yahweh. There was never a point in time where this does not occur. There's never a point in time where Jesus does not illustrate who God is to us. So great questions like, well, what did he say about him? What did he do? How did he reveal him? And this is where it starts to get good. Then Jesus refers to Yahweh as a bunch of different ways. He gets real creative in some ways. The names of Yahweh from Jesus himself, just the ways he referred to him. He referred to him as God, as Theos, right? Just as the title, like he is what we do, the capital G-O-D. Right? Hopefully wrote some good bars and hooks about that. But in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, he tells us that. He calls him Lord in Mark 12, in Matthew 22, in Luke 10. He calls him the great king in Matthew 5. He calls Yahweh Lord of heaven and earth in Matthew 11, 25. He calls Yahweh God of the living in Matthew 22. He calls him the Most High in Luke 6. And he calls him Eloi, which is a direct translation from Elohim, which is a direct translation of Yahweh itself. And he calls him that in Matthew 27 and Mark 15. And so we got all of those representations of like, okay, those are all pieces. But if you notice, there's like one, maybe two references to each one, right? But Jesus actually revealed to Yahweh as something else, far and above anything else. And just before I zoom in on that, just remember, what did we talk about last week? We're talking about a God that is. He will be, he always will be, he never ceases to exist. He was before, he is now, he is after. We're talking about the creator, the videos we watch, the creator of the universe, of the earth, of the heavens, of the stars, of the sun, like that Yahweh, and that Yahweh loves us, and it's like, yeah, this is expansive, this is huge, this is magnificent. And he goes, but by and far, the largest way that I want to make sure, Jesus, Yeshua, make sure you represent me this way. And he represents him as Father. Father. No other God. Thor ain't your daddy. No other God that you would go into ancient, the Romans with Apollo, the Greeks with Zeus. Right? Ain't no other God going like, I want you to picture me as Father. And not just any Father. Like when Jesus referred to him as Father, it was like Abba Father, which was like an intimate way of saying Father. He's like, hey, Dad. Hey, dearest Dad. And he's like, oh, hi, son. And the Pharisees and the religious people are like, you can't talk to him like that. We're not even whispering his name. We have come up with abbreviation upon abbreviation upon abbreviation because there's separation. And he's like, oh, no, I'll just stick with dear Dad. Oh, hey, son. And he does it. Look at this. Jesus refers to God as Father. Look at how many more times. Look at all those. I was going to read out like all the references and stuff and like nerd out. And they were like, you don't have time. But I have time to reference all the other ones collectively combined. That's how much. And he doesn't just refer to him. This is really good news. He refers to him as Dad. He's like, Dad, Dad, Dad. Every time he talks to him, he refers to him as Dad. But he just doesn't just refer to him as his dad. This is even better news. Jesus begins to refer to God as our Father this many times. Still more collectively than all the other times that he refers to him. As our Father. He says, in Matthew 5:44, it actually says, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. And he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. And so we come to this realization that Yahweh is, and Yahweh is creator, and Yahweh loves, but Yahweh is Father. But for some of us, right, on this side of earth, we're going, I don't know if I like that picture. I have a great earthly representation of a father, but not everybody gets to be as lucky as I am, right? And we got a lot of twisted up father figures at times in our nation, in our society. And so for some of us, I get, right? Like that's tough. Like, I don't know. I don't have a good picture. Lucky for us, Jesus didn't leave us to picture from our own father figures. He goes, let me paint some pictures. And in a couple different ways. I mean, there's way more than the ones I'm going to share today. But in Matthew 7:9-11, he says, do you know of any parent who would give his hungry child who asked for food a plate of rocks instead? Or when asked for a piece of fish, what parent would offer his child a snake instead? If you, imperfect as you are, know how to lovingly take care of your children and give them what's best, how much more ready is your heavenly Father to give wonderful gifts to those who ask him? So already right there, it's like we're getting picture painted where it's like, oh, he's saying even the decent ones here aren't as good as the one we have up there. Like we have an even better Father than the ones we look at here and go, he's talking, yeah, as imperfect as you are, you still would be pretty good, right? And we're like, yeah, I'll be okay. I'll be all right. Yeah, I would do that. I wouldn't do that to my kid. Well, your heavenly Father's even more willing to do that. But as we zero in on the fatherhood of Yahweh, we start to look, and I love it, and we're going to zero in on this one story right here. It's found in Luke 15. And if you didn't know, Jesus is hanging out with types of people, and he did it all the time. The types of people that us churchgoers wouldn't always recommend hanging out with. we jump into the story in Luke chapter 15, and I love this. It says, many dishonest tax collectors and other notorious sinners often gathered around to listen as Jesus taught the people. By the way, I always question, like, how bad you have to be the notorious sinner. You know what I mean? He's like, no, the way Luke writes it, he's like, these weren't even just your regular day sinners. These were the notorious ones. Like, you gotta be, what scale, anyway, okay. This raised concerns among the Jewish religious leaders and experts of the law. Indignant, they grumbled and complained, saying, look how this man associates with all these notorious sinners and welcomes them all to come to him. In response, Jesus gives them 3 illustrations. He goes into the story of the lost sheep and what happens. The shepherd loses a sheep and then he leaves the 99. Remember, we know this story, right? Some of us. And he leaves the 99. He goes after the one. He finds the one and he's like, and then he goes and tells everybody, I found the lost sheep. And then they throw a big celebration and have a huge party. And then there's the story of the lost coin, and the woman loses a coin in her house, and she upends, she moves the couch, she throws the rug, she kicks the kids out because it's their fault, and then she's like, and then she finally finds the lost coin, and she's like, I found it, and she goes tells all their neighbors, and they throw a big party. And then he tells a story. It's the story of a lost son, and we know it as the prodigal, right? And it's about we kind of focus in, and we're going to tell the story. We focus in on the younger son's narrative quite a bit, right? If you've been around church for any amount of time anyway, you know, oh yeah, the younger son, the prodigal son, the runaway, the rebellious son. We got lots of names for him. And in Luke 15:11, he begins to tell the story. And again, remember, you got a bunch of notorious sinners, right? And tax collectors who were hated, who were despised. And then you've got a bunch of teachers of the law and Pharisees, religious minds that are standing around. They're about to listen to this story Jesus is about to zero in on. And it says, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And we're just going to pause right there. We got to time out for a second because there's context to that moment. You see, if you know anything about the Jewish cultural history or context within this moment, what you know is that the only time a father ever divided his estate or gave of his inheritance was either when he was on his deathbed or when he was already dead. And so this younger, brash, rebellious, nasty old son walks up to his father, right? That's how we picture. Okay, I was just picturing myself at like 16, 17. And he walks up and he's like, hey, you're as good as dead to me. Give me what's mine. Give me what's yours that I want to claim. And let me be on my way. The son is disowning his family and his father. And in this moment, every Pharisee, every teacher of the law, every person, everyone within the culture would have been gasped. There would have been a gasp. He didn't. Oh, no, he did. Oh, boo. Somebody snap up on him. Somebody back him up. Somebody get him into the stoning circle already. It's true. But Jesus is trying to reveal something right from the beginning of the story. He's trying to go, hey, this father that I've been talking about is different than the fathers that you have. It's different than the fathers that have been represented. In fact, there could be a son who could say something as disrespectful as this, and the father's like, okay, yeah, if that's what you want. Is that what you want? Yes. Okay, here you go. It's already wildly different. But then the story goes on and just wait and see. Because with this crazy love, you'd think, well, he would have just been transformed already. Right away. A father that honors that much, he's like, well, the son's fixed. No. This rebellious brother, this rebellious son, do you know what he does with it? He goes, not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had. He set off for a distant country, and it takes him about 6 words. And there he squandered his wealth in wild living. That's me. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this one, but I can relate to this. I can relate to both of them, but I can really relate to this one, especially thinking, like, if you got all the money, if you got $1 million handed to you between the ages of 16 and 18, and you could just go do with it whatever you wanted. Like, I grew up in a house of rules, and the narrative in my mind so often was like, just wait till I get out. Just wait and watch what I do. I'm going to spend $20 on a PG-13 movie in the theaters. Just watch. Just wait for it. It's about to go down. If somebody gave me $1 million, it's like we would have been in so much trouble. And this is what he did. He took all that money, and he says he squandered it in wild living. He got prostitutes. He's having sex. He's doing drugs. He's having parties on party on party on night on top of night. And then finally, just like every terrible, tragic story like this, right? What happens? The money runs out. The sin's fun for a season. That missing the mark moment, that just squandering it all, it's like that's fun for a while, and then it runs out. And then what happens? And then you got to trade the mansion for the one-room studio apartment. And then you're like, I ran out of money. What do I do now? I got to go get a job somewhere. But all the employers that have been watching your life are like, dude, you never worked a day in your life. You've been partying. All the friends that were like, with you, they're like, oh, the music stopped. Can't pay the DJ anymore. Somebody else, though, is throwing a party down the road, and then we out. And it all comes to a screeching halt for this young man. And he finds himself, finally, he's probably the only job he can get. He's feeding pigs. And Jesus tells us it gets so bad for this young man that he's feeding, not just feeding the pigs, he's eating the feed that he's feeding the pigs. He's eating pig's food. And that's when it dawns on him. The best idea ever. I know I could go work my way out of this. I'll go back to the Father. I know that there's no way. I disowned him. And so I know there's no way that he hasn't disowned me as a son. But if I don't go back as a son, what if I just go back as a servant? I'll just go back as a servant. I'll work my way out of it. All the inheritance that I lost, I'll try to build it back up. Through my service of my whole life, I'll work my way out of this. And so you can imagine as he picks himself up, he tries to wipe the pig poop off of him. It's still on him, but he's walking towards it basically in rags. And he's coming back, and you can imagine, right? Like anytime you've really messed it up, right, in life, and you got to do the I'm sorry speech, and you're driving on the way, and you're looking in the mirror maybe, and you're like rehearsing this. I don't know if I say it this way, maybe if I phrase it this way. And so you could picture, you could kind of imagine he's on his way home, and he's saying his I'm sorry speech, and he's reciting his like, oh yeah, I'll fall on my knees, and I'll begin to grovel, and I'll begin to be like, good, please, Dad, don't kill me, just let me serve. And he's rehearsing the speech, and it says from a distance, from far off, the Father's been sitting there waiting, and he sees him from a distance, and he runs to him. If you know the culture, by the way, super undignified for a man of status and honor to ever run. So again, another moment of the Father being willing to undignify himself for the sake of his son. And he begins to run to him. And he runs after him, and he runs after him, and he catches up to him. And when he finally catches up to him, there's 3 things he does, and it's this beautiful moment. The first thing is he goes, get a robe, and he throws a robe onto him. And you know what that represents? This guy's in pig feed and dirt and gross, and all of his mistakes are bearing for everybody to see. It's embarrassment for him. It's a shame moment for him. And the Father right away goes, I got you covered. All your mistakes, gone. I got them. I got you covered. And then the next thing he does is he takes a ring. And the ring was a symbol of power and authority within the family. In fact, catch this. With the ring, the seal of the ring is how they would make financial decisions. It's like giving your bank ledger. It's like giving the bank account, the authority of the bank account, and giving the bank account password to the guy who just lost you $1 million. But he goes, you're coming back. I'm going to instill into you the power and authority of the family line. You can now make financial decisions again for the family. You have your power and your authority back. And then the third thing he does is he throws sandals on his feet. And you know what the sandals represented? In that time, in that day and age, the only people who wore when servants walked around the house, they had to walk around barefoot. But the sons were given a fine pair of sandals that they could walk about the house. And so he literally goes, let me restore your identity. You will not be back coming as a servant. You will be back coming as a son of whom I call son. And so he restores his honor. He restores his dignity. He restores his status. He restores his identity just right there. And for some of you, maybe this is the moment for you, right? Maybe you've been a rebellious son or daughter for a long time. Maybe you've been in the mud. Maybe you've been reaping the consequences of some of your actions or decisions for a long time. And the Yahweh, God, Jesus is just trying to say, you know what? There's good news. The moment you stand up, the moment you turn, the moment, I need but a whisper, and I am there. And I want to restore you to honor. I want to restore your status. I want to restore your dignity. I want to restore your identity. You are my son. You are my daughter. You do not need to run. You do not need to hide in shame, in guilt, in dishonor. You do not need to be like Adam and Eve in the garden. You do not need to be like Cain. Come to me, reason with me, talk with me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. I have a life for you. I have a life for you. And so often in the church world, we love to end the story there, if we're being honest. Because that's not about us. We've been working with Jesus for a while. We've been following the rules. We've been doing all the things. I gave up the parties a long time ago, or the ideas of the parties. I gave that up a while ago. That's fool's folly. Not me. So we just end the story. We're like, yeah, you nasties living in the pig pen, you need this. Turn, walk toward him. He'll run to you. I might not, but he will. But that's not the end of the story. There's another son. In fact, the other son is the oldest son. And the oldest son, he's been working. He's been the one who's been keeping the family line intact. In fact, in the culture, when the younger son ran off, you know who took on all of his responsibilities? This guy. And he's been working hard, and he's been earning every second, and he's been sweating and bleeding and crying for the sake of his family in the line. He's the righteous one. He's the religious one. He's the one who's been doing it. I've been coming to church every week. I've been studying the gospel every week. I've been reading my scriptures every day. And he comes back and he sees this party happening. And one of the servants, he's like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, you didn't hear. The younger son came back and your father threw a party for him. And this right here is where the older son shows so many of his cards. And he's not happy about it. And we pick up the story in Luke 15, 28 through 32. It says the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look! Already, by the way, did you see the exclamation point? You didn't talk to somebody like that. In that culture, you didn't talk to a father like that. He's got the same response, that same disdain, that same disrespect of give me what's mine and let me go. This is the same tone. Look. All these years, and he's about to show his cards, I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, you hear that? Who's separating? Did the father separate or did the older son separate? The older son separated. This son of yours has squandered your property with prostitutes. He comes home and you kill the fattened calf for him. And watch the father's response. It's all in the father's response. Listen to what he says so carefully. My son, the father said, you are always with me. And everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. See, right from the get-go, by the way, at the beginning of the moment, when the older son won't go into the party his father's hosting, it is a massive slap in the face. And when the host of the party in that culture leaves the party to go, everybody in the guest room, every guest in the room at that point freezes. What's going on? The host is never supposed to leave. That's undignified. Why is he leaving the party he called? What do we do? Do we keep drinking the wine? Are you going to drink the wine? I'll sip the wine if you sip the wine. Are we going to keep eating? Are you going to eat that meat? Or what are we supposed to do? The whole party freezes. It stalls out because the host has left. And the host has left because you know what the Father is still about? He's going, I'll reason with the rebellious one. I'll come, I'll chase after, I'll pursue the rebellious one. I'm also willing to chase after the religious one. See, if we had two takeaways for the younger brother, it would be that the younger brother wanted the Father's stuff but didn't care about being with the Father. And that the younger brother was very much in the wrong but still incredibly loved. But if you paid attention, the same is true for the older brother, the older son. The older brother wanted the Father's stuff, but didn't care about being with the Father. And the older brother was very much in the wrong, but still incredibly loved. And I can't help but imagine or start to think or contemplate, maybe for so often we've been so focused on this brother, this son, that son. And the whole point was not even necessarily about the sons. The sons were both equally wrong but incredibly loved. But the Father was the one who was saying, why are you making it about, to the religious, why are you making it about who gets in and who doesn't get in? Why are you trying to stack up and stack out? What to the rebellious son? Why are you so consumed with your shame and your guilt? I just want to be with you. I just want to be with you. I just want to have a relationship with you. Although both sons were so consumed with all these things, the Father only loved and never cared about being with his kids. Yahweh loves and cares about being with you. This is Jesus' revelation to us. What kind of Father do you have? Yahweh is a Father who cares, loves, and wants to be with you. That's the beautiful representation that Yeshua gives us of Yahweh. There's a Father who loves, a Father who cares, a Father who sees somebody in the mud, the issues in your life, the depravity in your life, the sin in your life, the mistakes. You just missed the mark and you keep missing the mark, and it's having consequences on your life, and he's going, please, I'm waiting for you on the other side. I want to restore your dignity. I want to restore your status. I want to restore your identity. I love you, and don't come to me asking to be my servant. You're still thinking it's about the stuff. It's never been about the stuff. It's always been about the relationship with us. And you have the religious one and honestly living in just as much sin. Why? Because he's missing the mark too. He's missing the mark. And he's like, well, I've been doing the work. I've been bleeding. I've been sweating. I've been crying. I've been working. I've been plowing the field. I've been doing all the stuff. I've been following all the rules. Is it really just about the rules for you? It's, what about me? What about being with me? And you know that's the power of this story. Jesus never concludes it. Do you know where the story ends? We don't know. There's a whole thing about the Gospel of Luke I don't have time to get into. We'll come with that takeaway another time. But I'll tell you this. The story concludes with the father contending with the older son. And do you know what? Do you remember who's listening? You got a bunch of notorious sinners and tax collectors, and they heard loud and clear, whoa, all I got to do is take a couple steps toward, all I got to do is look at, all I got to do is face your direction, and you'll run to me. Wow, we have a Father who pursues us. To the older ones, the question's a little different. To the rebellious ones, to the religious ones, not the rebellious, the religious ones, to the teachers of the law, they're sitting there, and they're the ones at the end with the Father, mad, angry, crossing their arms. Who's in? Tell me who's in. Tell me who's out. Is it me or him? And this story just ends. You want to know the question for you today? Whether you're rebellious or whether you're religious, the question is, what will you do with the Father? You can stand with me. What will you do with the Father? There is a Father that Jesus just told us about. And regardless of the spectrum that you're on, whether you're on the side where you're like, I've wasted so much of my life, or whether you're on the side that's like, I followed every rule. He doesn't care. He's like, big deal. What are you going to do with relationship with me. Because all I'm consumed with, all I'm about is want a relationship with my creation. That's what I was about with Adam and Eve. That's what I was about with Cain and Abel. That's what I was about when I got the Israelites out of Egypt. That's what I was about when I sent Jesus. I just want a relationship with you. So what will you do? You can go ahead and close your eyes for a moment. Because I just want to invite you into relationship with a Father who loves you. Yahweh loves you, cares about being with you. And I want to know, regardless, maybe you got a little bit of both. I know for me, I got both in me. I've been in the church world long enough. I got some of that older brother syndrome on me. You know what? I still got some of that younger brother stuff on me. God, give me the stuff so I could go have a really good time. Okay, God, thank you for the blessing. Okay, can I go now? I got some of the older brothers. Okay, everybody else gets it, but not them, right? They don't get in, right? I'm guilty of both. Maybe you're guilty of one or the other. Maybe you're both. There's a Father that I know that would love for you this week for your focus to just be about being with Him. It's not about shame. It's not about guilt. It's not about any of that. It's not about who else gets in, who doesn't get in. It's not about outside noises and voices. It's just about being with Him. Would you accept the invitation from a Father who loves you and cares about you and just wants to be with you? Today I'm going to ask you, whether religious, rebellious, whether maybe a little bit of both, if you just slip a hand into the air. And all you're doing is saying, I accept the invitation. In fact, I'm going to make this week about being with the Father. That's what I want. That's what I want to be about. If that's the way the Father is toward me, then that's what I want to be. I don't want to be about His stuff and then just go and run. I don't want to be about even my own shame and guilt and make that the central focus. No. I want to make the Father the focus. I want to make our relationship the focus. What good news! God, I thank you for every hand that's raised right now. I thank you for it. God, I pray that our focus will be about relationship with the Father. That we would not make the same mistakes that the younger brother did, that we would not make the same mistake that the older brother did, that we would be sons and daughters of the Most High, sons and daughters, that we would recognize we are sons and daughters of a Father who loves and cares about us, just wants to be with us, and that we would accept and extend that invitation to Him as well and go, I just want to be with you too. Dad, I want to be with you. Let's hang out. That our sole focus this week and next week and for the rest of our lives even would be a representation of relationship with you as Jesus represented you so clearly and succinctly. And I thank you for it. And I praise you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.